you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Tonight, after Jeremy Hunt's statement to the House of Commons, which sounded rather like a Labour Party, not Conservative Party, I asked, is there any point to the Tory party here on in? We'll talk the economics and politics of that. We'll look at the Channel crisis, where Border Force now say there is a significant risk to national security as a result of those that are coming. And on Talking Pints, we'll talk royals with Squadron Leader Graham Laurie, who flew the royal family all over the world for many, many years. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening to you. And the top story, as you've been hearing, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has been warning MPs today about decisions of eye-watering difficulty in the coming weeks, as he detailed how he has dropped the majority of pledges made by Kwasi Kwarteng in the mini-budget. In an emergency statement designed to calm the financial markets, Jeremy Hunt announced plans to cap the cost of energy for 2 years, but that would end in April, with more targeted support for households instead. He also announced scrapping the planned cut of 1 pence to the basic income tax rate, which will now stay at 20p in the pound. Well, the pound and financial markets have since rallied following those announcements, but the Chancellor warned there were more difficult decisions to come.
This government will take the difficult decisions necessary to ensure there is trust and confidence in our national finances. That means decisions of eye-watering difficulty. But I give the House and the public this assurance: every single one of those decisions, whether reductions in spending or increases in tax, will be shaped through core, compassionate, conservative values that will prioritise the needs of the most vulnerable.
Well, in response, the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves accused the government of losing credibility following the change in plans.
On Friday, the unedifying spectacle of the Chancellor being dragged back from the IMF before he could do any more damage to our economy. So she has turned to a new Chancellor, who finished 8th out of 8 in the Tory leadership contest, winning just 18 votes from MPs. The Tories have run out of credibility, and now they are running out of chancellors.
Well, in news away from politics today, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says hundreds of police officers should be sacked following a new report commissioned after the death of Sarah Everard. A review of the Met's internal misconduct system found officers were getting away with criminal behaviour owing to an anything-goes attitude. The report described some police procedures as racist and misogynistic as well. Sir Mark Rowley has said he's appalled by the findings and has apologised to officers and members of the public who may have felt let down. A Manchester United footballer was denied bail today and will spend over a month in custody. Mason Greenwood is charged with attempted rape, controlling and coercive behaviour and assault. The 21-year-old was first held in January over allegations relating to a young woman after images and videos were posted on social media. He was immediately suspended from playing or training with the Old Trafford club. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. We have a political crisis, the likes of which I've certainly never seen in my lifetime. An economic crisis that is not going away quickly. A social crisis that grows worse with every single week. And all of this after 12 years of Tory misrule. Think about the economy. Low growth, low productivity. Can you believe our productivity is 20% lower than that of France? It seems almost impossible. Asset inflation, which means because of quantitative easing over the last few years, if you own property, you've done well. But if you want to get onto the housing ladder, sorry, that's not for you. Taxes, after today, going up to levels last seen in 1950 during that post-war socialist experiment. And of course, the cost of living crisis linked directly to energy, where we have, I think, the most stupid self-inflicted wound we could ever have caused ourselves. We have more than enough oil, gas and coal to keep this country going. But no, we've gone for wind. And just to add to it, the Conservative Party in 2017 actually got rid of our gas storage facilities. And really, with the turbulence in the markets over the course of the last few weeks, the truth of it is the energy price cap that is the real problem, not relatively limited cuts in some areas of tax, even if it was badly delivered. And be in no doubt from Jeremy Hunt today that the Tories have declared war on the self-employed. Now, I really do mean it. The IR35 rules are so awful, such a complete disaster, that many people have simply, in their mid-50s, just packed up working. And for small companies, their taxes are going to rise significantly. A major rise in corporation tax and a rise in dividend tax, which is how many small businesses pay themselves. Well, they were elected, of course, to get Brexit done, and they did, perhaps after a fashion, but I wonder whether they actually ever really believed in it, because it's not being completed. Northern Ireland still cut off from the rest of the UK. Fisheries betrayed. Cuts to regulations, supply-side reforms, which simply didn't happen. And, of course, we're still stuck in the European Convention on Human Rights. Immigration, I'm afraid, legal immigration going up to new high levels. Can you believe it? Our population has risen by 10 million since the year 2000, and most of that down directly to immigration. And when it comes to the Channel, now 75,000 have crossed the Channel since 2018. 70,000 of them males. That's more than the fighting strength of the British Army, and still they come. And just last week, Border Force said there are significant risks to our national security because of who is coming. Law and order, well, I'm afraid breaking down in such a way that many of us now simply don't even bother to report crime, and people are fleeing our big cities. But it's okay, because Jeremy Hunt has come to the rescue. The man who was beaten by Boris Johnson in 2019, the man who was knocked out in the first round of the leadership contest this year, and he is not just Chancellor of the Exchequer, he's running the country. It looks to me like a globalist coup. Oh, I have to say Joe Biden was so delighted. The IMF are pleased, the OECD, the Bank of England, the Treasury, the Chancellor of Germany, they're all over the moon. You see, they want a bigger state with bigger taxes, and that was the great sin of what was proposed by Kwarteng. The idea that we should keep more of our own money and perhaps in time reduce the size of a state. I felt the statement that was made today would have been just the same had it come from a Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer. And by turning their backs on the self-employed and small businesses in the way that they have, by turning away from free markets, by making us as uncompetitive for investment as they are, I believe that the Tory party now serves no real purpose and must be replaced. I honestly don't for one moment believe they can get back ever to what they were. I believe the Tory party is now dead. So you tell me, is there any point to this Conservative party? Farage at gbnews.uk. And so significant is what has happened, and so small now, it seems to me, are the economic differences between Labour and the Conservatives when it comes to a choice at the next general election, that we at GB News are now launching a People's Forum, because the country is at a crossroads. And I'm going to come out and travel ever more than before. And I want to find out from you, if you're involved in local business, involved in the local community, if you've been a Conservative voter throughout your life, I want to know what you make of all of this. Because my feeling is, unless a real alternative comes along, we'll get the lowest turnout at the next general election that possibly we have ever seen in our lifetimes. And this all begins this Thursday. I will be in Deal in Kent this Thursday. It's a seat the Conservatives hold with a majority of 12,000. But Blair did win it back in 1997. If the Conservative Party lose the Dover and Deal seat, they will lose the next general election. So if you want to come along on Thursday, if you're interested in where the Conservative Party is going and the lack of choices, as I see it, please contact us at gbnews.uk. That's Deal this Thursday evening. Well, joining me to go through all of this is Liam Halligan, GB News' business and economics editor. As I understand it, Liam, the proposed tax cuts from Kwasi Kwarteng, and maybe he did go too far, too fast, and I kind of get that, but I liked the direction of travel. His proposed tax cuts would have amounted to about 45 billion.
Correct.
As it is, there's now a tax increase of 32 billion. That is a very dramatic swing.
It is. It's a 5% increase in taxation in one bound. So for every £20 that the state taxes, it's now going to tax you another £1, which is a very significant increase, given this isn't even a budget, it's just a kind of fiscal event.
Well, interesting you say that, because didn't Hunt warn us that more tax increases are coming?
We've got another fiscal statement in a couple of weeks, the 31st of October. There'll be some spending cuts there, or certainly some reductions in the increase in spending, some fiscal retrenchment. And I agree with you, Nigel. If you look at the proposals that Kwarteng and Liz Truss put together in the mini-budget, there was nothing in there that was particularly radical. There was a reduction in the top rate of income tax to where it was under Blair and Brown. There was a reduction in the basic rate of income tax to 19 pence. There was a freezing of corporation tax, not an increase, a freezing of corporation tax.
I noticed this.
At 19. So Labour agreed with the reduction in the basic rate of income tax. They agreed with the reduction in national insurance, the only part of the mini-budget that's actually really gone through. They agreed with the energy price cap. So the majority of the proposals Labour actually agreed with. I think the mistake that was made, and we should acknowledge there were mistakes, Nigel, the mistake that was made is all these proposals were being done at once, and a small change proposed by Kwarteng to lower the top rate of tax from 45 to 40 pence in a pound, not particularly radical, as I said, but to do that, it's for the top 2% of earners at a time when the cost of living squeeze was really starting to bite, as winter is coming, as the nights are drawing in, and a lot of vulnerable families are worried. That was a bit politically tin-eared, in my view.
That may be true, Liam. But, I've been looking today. You can move tomorrow as a high earner to Italy and pay top rate tax for 5 years of 30%. Some deals, you might even get it down to about 12.5%.
Yep.
The French are making similar tax offers. Luxembourg.
There's going to be a brain drain.
So we're going to lose people, aren't we?
And not only at the top level, we're also going to lose people in terms of businesses and corporation tax. You said this is a war on the self-employed.
Yeah.
I'd agree with you. Think about Northern Ireland tonight. If you're a business in Northern Ireland, you're about to face from April a corporation tax rate of 25%. That's double what it is in the Republic. I wouldn't begrudge the Republic their low rate of corporation tax, but if you're trying to attract investment in Northern Ireland and build a business, that becomes more difficult. Combine that with these IR35 rules, which are going to stay in place. They are the bane of the lives of many self-employed people, because Treasury types think that these IR35 self-employment rules are a tax dodger's charter. Whereas actually, a lot of us in journalism are freelance. There's journalists that you and I know, their lives have been completely ruined because suddenly they're told by the revenue the rules are changing retrospectively and they owe hundreds of thousands of pounds in tax. This corporation tax increase, plus the IR35, plus the changes into dividend tax, this isn't going to affect the big city rollers. We can see the lights from the city. They've got very
Goldman Sachs.
They've got very clever accountants who can wheel and deal and do all this. This is going to affect people running chip shops, laundrettes. This is going to affect people running building companies. This is going to affect the striving classes of Britain, the alarm clock classes, the people who get up in the morning and provide for themselves and their families and employ people in their communities. And it's a shame. I don't think Jeremy Hunt understands that class of people at all. I think Liz Truss does, and I think Kwasi Kwarteng does, but they're now no longer in charge.
No, and Truss is in office, but clearly not in power, and one wonders, looking at her demeanour.
I worry for her personally. I don't want to, I don't want to sound deprecating or patronising in any way, but I thought today there's a genuine human tragedy. I know her quite well. It's my job to know people in the cabinet and so on, as you know. And I thought she looked really more than troubled. I think she looked, I worried about what was going on. Penny Mordaunt made a couple of slightly cryptic references to why she wasn't actually in the statement in the House, referring to Keir Starmer's unstarred emergency question, and I wonder what we're going to hear about that over the next couple of days.
Well, she may well be gone. The party's in complete chaos, and I'll talk more the politics of it with Trevor Kavanagh in a moment, who's been watching this and charting this for many, many years, longer than we have, if that's possible.
Longer than,
Liam, I'm calling this a globalist coup, not because I'm some kind of conspiracy theorist, because it's very, very clear to me that as soon as the IMF got involved, Joe Biden got involved, the German Chancellor got involved. It's as if the people that go to G20 and G7 or even COP26 or whatever else it may be, they've kind of agreed that the state is going to get bigger and that taxes will not come down. The ferocity of the attack on taking the rate of 45p to 40p, where it was for the whole of Blair's premiership.
It's hardly radical.
And the amount of money, in a sense, was very small. And we'd rather keep bright people in Britain than lose them to tax deals in Italy or France or Luxembourg or elsewhere. I genuinely think this is a globalist coup.
Well, what we've got now, we've got Rishi Sunak's budget delivered by the bloke who came last in the Tory leadership contest, somebody who lost among the constituency MPs to Boris in the 2019 leadership There've been lots of Trusses, there've been lots of Jeremy Hunt supporters today briefing the press saying, grown-ups in charge and so on. But I think there are lots of Tory backbenchers who are extremely angry at this. I think there are many Tory activists who are extremely angry at this. I think maybe, you've said for effect you think the Tory party is dead. I certainly think it is in deep trouble. Why? Because the Tory party relies on its activist
What is the point of it?
It's activist base to knock people up, to get out the vote. Why are they going to get out the vote if the person they didn't want is now Chancellor, and the person they didn't want will become soon, in my view, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister?
Too many lies, Liam. Too many lies, election after election after election. Too many broken promises, too much under-delivery against targets in all sectors, including the social sphere as well. Given that the economics of this government now is virtually identical to that of Keir Starmer, is there any point to them?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? And that's why I agree with you. I think there will be a very low turnout at the next election because, you've got Starmer, who is pretty centrist now. I think a lot of the Labour left will be disillusioned. They won't turn out. And then you've got the sort of Hunt-Sunak access. That will mean a lot of the Tory party rank and file is seriously disillusioned because they're not getting any say in the leadership at all. In fact, they're getting exactly who they voted against as leader. And it strikes me that we have... This is clearly an economic crisis, but to me, it's much, much more of a political crisis. I didn't see anything particularly dangerous in the mini budget. I saw two people who were mesmerised that they were in power. They were in a bit of a hurry. They should have played their cards a bit closer to their chest. They should have been a bit more in touch with the markets. I think not using the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, was probably a bit of a mistake, but I don't think they deserve to be out on their ear, out of office.
4 chancellors in 4 months, you couldn't make it up. Liam Halligan, thank you very much indeed. Well, Liam being much more diplomatic than me, I cannot see the point of them. I mean, if they're going to have Labour policies, why not just vote for the real thing? In a moment, I'll be joined by Trevor Kavanagh, Associate Editor of The Sun. We'll talk through the politics of it, and we'll go to Albania to speak to a well-known journalist, and I'll ask him, why are you sending us all your criminals?
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, your thoughts at home to my question of, is there any point to this Conservative Party? Paul says, none whatsoever, when the Chancellor is fighting her battles. Well, she's out of the picture. I mean, you know, how long will Liz Truss last? It doesn't really matter, I don't think. Hunt's running the country. One Twitter user says, the current Tory party has no Conservative policies, so no, there is no point to them at all. That's exactly how I feel about what they've done over the course of the last 12 years. Patrick says, bankers are running the country. Is this good or right? Well, globalists certainly are. And Robert says, as the markets do not allow any variations. Well, look, you know, all this business about the markets, this was hysterical nonsense to suspect that the run on the pound, the gilt yields changing as they did, was all because of cutting top rate tax from 45p to 40. It was because of the energy bailout. That's the real financial problem that we face. So Mr. Hunt is running the country, and he's pro the Communist Chinese Party, he's pro the European Union, he's pro lockdown, he's pro vaccine mandates. Trevor Kavanagh, he doesn't sound like much of a Conservative, does he?
No, that's rather worrying. I mean, he's a very personable chap, face to face, very nice bloke, very avuncular sort of style, and comes across very well on television.
But then you examine it a little more closely, and he's an avowed Remainer who worked hard with Theresa May to deliver Brexit in name only. He wanted to stay in the single market, and I suspect still does. As Chancellor, either as Chancellor or perhaps indeed as Prime Minister. Is he going to return to that, or is he going to let it drop? Well, I doubt. I think that he also has rather blob-like characteristics. He is the Minister for the public sector, really. And this is a worrying thing in a Conservative administration. He does believe in things like lockdown and the power of the state over the individual. And he does admire the Chinese communists. He did want zero COVID. Now, those are the sort of things that, yes, we see this from Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, but we don't expect it from the Conservative Party.
You've written about these things, you've studied these things, you've commented on these political affairs for decades. Have you ever seen a mess like this?
No, and nor has anybody else. This has never happened before. 4 chancellors in 4 months, and possibly 4 prime ministers in 6 years. These are startling figures. And I think that what we've got is the result of the 12 years, or certainly the first 9 years of David Cameron and George Osborne, followed by Theresa May, which was a period when all the signposts towards Thatcherism were torn down and replaced. And now they're invoking the name of Margaret Thatcher as if she's their patron saint. But the fact is that the Tory party has gone in a totally different direction. It's gone in a socialist direction.
Yes, I mean, what was presented today by Hunt could just as easily have been put by Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer. It was a very Labour-style budget. I thought particularly the attack on the self-employed and small companies, there was something very vindictive and nasty about that. I mean, don't they understand that real capitalism happens at the grassroots level?
Yes, but the Treasury hates IR35. It's a way of people having and keeping their own money. It's anathema to the Gordon Brown type Treasury attitude to life. I do hope you're dusting off your drone missiles for the future, because they're going to be rich pickings, you know.
Well, I mean, Trevor, I've watched this party go, from crisis to crisis to make promises at successive general elections without, I think, ever the intention of really carrying it out. It's perfectly clear that the One Nation wing are completely and utterly in control of this, with their very powerful friends in the big banks and some of the big global businesses. I mean, is there actually any point to this party? I know it's been around for 200 years. I know it's been amazingly successful. Does it have a future?
Right now, no. I don't think it even has a leader or a prime minister. I think that Liz Truss will be lucky to survive more than weeks, possibly even days. As she said, they're coming to get me. And they are. They're coming to get her, and they're going to get her. And we will have another prime minister, and it looks like it will be either Rishi Sunak, who's the favourite, or Jeremy Hunt, if he decides that after all he is now effectively prime minister. Why give that up? I mean, that could be yet another bloodthirsty battle between what remains of the big players in the Conservative Party.
But they can't go back to the members. That's the view of Westminster, isn't it? That 3-month process, the country won't put up with it. So then they effectively choose themselves. And it won't be uncontested either, because there are divisions that exist in the party. So they then choose the next Prime Minister. Where does that leave the Conservative Party membership? The people that pay their subscriptions, deliver leaflets, stand in council elections? I mean, it's pretty bleak, isn't it?
I think what you're seeing, and you of all people will know this, that this is the result of the Brexit vote. You've got Remainers versus Brexiteers, and even that is more complicated because allegedly Liz Truss is a Remainer or a convert. And we know that Penny Mordaunt and Rishi Sunak voted for Brexit. But Jeremy Hunt is an avowed Remainer, and right now is in a very powerful position to demand a place in whatever government takes over. Say, for instance, it's Rishi and Penny Mordaunt as Foreign Secretary. That still leaves Jeremy as Chancellor. Chancellors have enormous power over such things as whether we perhaps drift back into the single market or not.
Yes, and we haven't cut many regulations, so going back into it would actually be very, very easy, because we haven't taken advantage. You're right in what you say to me. There are going to be centre-right political opportunities, especially if proportional representation comes. I've been seeing moves, the general public, becoming now much more supportive of some element of PR in our system, Lord Mandelson and others. If we did get PR, that's the end of the Tory party, isn't it?
I think so. I think that is going to happen the moment that Labour takes power, which it's going to do.
Yeah.
The Tories are going to be defeated, and perhaps defeated terribly. It may be mauled beyond repair. There is going to be a rapprochement, there's going to be a rebuilding of parties, but there's going to be a long period before there is a Conservative Party once again ready to take on the ruling government of the day, which might be a coalition, of course. So I think that there is a huge appetite out there. I mean, 13 million people voted for Boris and Brexit in 2019, just 3 years ago.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are paying the price of what's happening in there tonight. They're the ones who are going to suddenly find themselves with a government they didn't want, a party which is going to be, for all the fact that Keir Starmer is trying to look centre ground, his is a left-wing party. Everything about Keir Starmer's background is a hard left politician.
Yes, but at the moment, not much to choose. For those of us that believe in liberty, small state capitalism, free markets, these are very depressing times, aren't they?
Yes, but as I say, a golden opportunity for people like you.
Well,
Nigel.
yes, and for GB News, because we're not going to give up the fight for these values. Trevor, thank you very much indeed. We managed to beat his phone going off, I'm very pleased to say. Well, it could be the call from number 10 for all we know. I don't know. Now, the Channel migrant crisis is getting a whole lot worse. An astonishing letter from the Border Force that went to the Home Secretary on Saturday, saying the surge in migrants poses a significant risk to national security. They point out a substantial change in the types that are coming. Young, fit males with suspected links to organised crime groups. Border Force officers now facing concerning incidents, including assaults and migrants fashioning makeshift weapons. Well, they say that Manston is now a powder keg, and it's a disaster. And another good story, I thought, good in the sense that it exposes the truth, is that Albanian migrants, who, by the way, now constitute 60% of those that are coming, are now walking out of the lovely hotels they're put in within 2 to 3 days and going straight to cannabis farms. What on earth is going on? If you look at TikTok, you can see they're openly boasting. Let's see some of this footage that was recently shown on Albanian television.
You okay for water? Yeah.
Okay, so look, this is a joke. They're boasting on TikTok that, you know, come to Britain, join a criminal gang, and because of a piece of legislation that Mrs May put in place, wasn't she brilliant? In 2015, then many of them will claim actually they've been conned by the traffickers. But what is going on? Well, let's go to Albania. Let's be joined by Irvin Kochi. He works for Albania's TV station, A2CNN. And I want to say, Irvin, thank you for joining the programme. What is it? Why are the criminal classes from Albania headed towards the United Kingdom?
Good evening, Nigel. It's a good question. I think that most of young Albanians want to go to the Great Britannia to make money fast. This is how the gangs reclaim how the cannabis farm works in Great Britannia. So I think that more the young Albanians get lied or get fooled by these gangs to go to the Great Britannia, and they get stuck in these illegal works to make money, to pay their debits, to pay the person who give the money to go to the Great Britannia. So this is like a circle that they cannot get out.
Well, hang on a second. I mean, I've looked at plenty, you know, with interpretation, plenty of TikTok videos. I mean, none of these young men that are leaving Albania are doing so under any false pretenses.
TikTok is like a TV show where the gangs reclaim their job. They can cross the channel with £5,000 to £7,000, and this is the price that the young Albanian has to pay to cross the channels to go illegally to the United Kingdom. So the TikTok basically is the front door of this illegal crime.
Now, Albania is a NATO member. It is an applicant country to join the European Union. It is a holiday destination for tens of thousands of Britons through much of the year. Presumably, given that this is, and you've said so yourself, illegal immigration, if we start to send back plane loads, roughly 7,000 who've come recently from Albania, presumably these young men will be welcomed back in your country.
I think it will be a decision of the British government if they gonna turn back the Albanian who decline or reclaim to stay in the United Kingdom. Most of them, I told before, are the victim of the criminal groups who recruit them to work as cannabis farm. So I think the victim cannot be blamed for their crime, but that need to support, but this is not amnesty for this illegal work that they do in the United Kingdom.
Well, we can argue about whether they're victims or not. And finally, why does Albania appear to have such a massive crime problem?
Excuse me, Nigel, I don't hear you clear.
I said, why does Albania seem to have such a big crime problem?
I don't think that Albania represents the major crime in the United Kingdom. It's a small part also of a big puzzle. The Albanians are, let's say, cheap workers, don't get too much money to go in this kind of work, illegal work. That's why Albanian, it's more like a fashion name by the criminal gangs in these days.
Well, I have to say, Irvin Kochi, thank you very much indeed for joining me direct from Albania. You know, maybe some of those people are conned into coming, but I have to say I'm not particularly convinced. Now, my What the Farage moment today, this really is something. An Iranian figure who is linked to the hijab crackdown. Now, you know all about this, don't you? A big crackdown was launched on women's clothing in Iran. It's led to significant protests, and it's led to dozens of people dying. And Saeed Reza Amil is secretary of Iran's Supreme Council of Cultural Revolution. Well, that's fine, you may say, but he's also director of the London-based Islamic Human Rights Commission. And he's campaigning in this country and being listened to and demanding that in British schools and workplaces that hijabs should be an option. He's also campaigning for women-only spaces. Now, what he actually means by women-only spaces is men-only spaces. And indeed, in parts of this country, they're having success. You know, swimming pools in some parts of this country, male days and female days. Segregation is coming to Britain's cities, and quite why somebody who is involved with that horrible, murderous regime is allowed to have any say in this country about how we run our schools or conduct our society is completely and utterly beyond me. Now, let's change gear in a moment. We're talking pints. I'll be joined by Squadron Leader Graham Laurie, a man who worked for the royal family, flew them all over the world. He had some good times and he had some tough times. We'll talk royal family in just a moment.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very clever. It's time for Talking Pints. I'm joined by Squadron Leader, RAF retired Graham Laurie MVO. Welcome to Talking Pints. Now, you were at a school that became quite well known. Rutlish Grammar in South London. You're a South London boy. And of course, John Major was a couple of years ahead of you.
He was.
And like you, well, you're both cricket lovers.
Absolutely, and that's something that I knew. I didn't actually know him at school. I knew of the name, but I didn't know him. But later on, when I flew him out to Rome for one of the Euro conferences, I sent a passenger chit down the back and put on the bottom the name of myself, and then Rutlish School cricket captain 1964. And a couple of days later, in Peterborough's column, there was a comment that he'd been flown by a fellow Rutlish pupil and was heard to say, well, at least one of us did well.
That shows a great sense of humour.
Exactly.
Now, Graham, there you were, you know, Royal Air Force officer, going up through the ranks, squadron leader, doing all the stuff that an RAF officer in those days did. And suddenly you're doing work for the Sultan of Brunei and things start to happen and things start to change in your life. Now, in those days, we had something called the Queen's Flight, which we don't have anymore. Explain how that worked.
Well, I was summoned, I was the examiner for the Andover aircraft that the Queen's Flight was flying. And I was summoned for interview to perhaps go on the flight, along with 6 others. And because I was the examiner, I always think it was rather better the devil they knew than the one they didn't.
Inside job.
Inside job, but I've no idea whether that was true. But I went for interview with the captain of the Queen's Flight in those days, which was Sir Archie Winskill, who was a ex-Hurricane Battle of Britain pilot from Biggin Hill. And I realised afterwards that, in fact, the main interview was the fact that I was sitting in the crew room with everybody else, and they were all looking at everybody who'd come through. I was the lucky one. I got the job, and by ducking and weaving, I stayed there until the Queen's Flight was disbanded.
So there you are. It's 1981. You've joined the Queen's Flight, and you're assigned to the very, very newly married.
Absolutely. I took over the day they came back from their honeymoon, because my predecessor, Squadron Leader Derek Lovett, actually was allowed to extend his service by 2 days in order to fly them on their honeymoon. It seems such... I couldn't really go and fly them out on their honeymoon as the first time I'd ever flown them. It was so nice for him to bow out by that. And that was, again, that was Archie Winskill's doing.
But suddenly you're flying, you know, these 2 incredibly famous people, and she became this quite astonishing global icon. I mean, but you couldn't believe your luck, could you, really?
Well, it was incredible. And, you know, everybody was following them. And the press coverage, when we went to airfields, I got worried that the photographers were going to get injured because the Andover was a propeller aircraft. And I had a real problem. I thought it's going to cause an accident. So I collared the Sun photographer, Arthur Edwards. And Arthur, I had a word with him. And I said, look, you know, can you control them a bit? And he said, of course I can. And he said, where do you want them? Where's the limit? And I said, outside the wingtip. And he said, OK. And we were at an airfield near Lincoln. And people started shuffling forward once the Princess had got on board, because they wanted to get a picture through the window. And I saw Arthur just grab one of the professional photographers were fine. They had their little steps. They stood up on that long lenses. Away they go. But I saw him grab a local photographer by the back of his collar and literally lift him back and just point out. And then I got a smile from him and a thumbs up.
Arthur was the top dog.
Absolutely brilliant guy.
And, you know, you flew them, but you also flew the Queen Mother, and you flew the Duke of Edinburgh, and you flew the Queen many times. How much of a sort of rapport did you manage to build up?
Well, Her Majesty never came up front to say thank you. She always went down the bag, always said to the captain of the Queen's flight, who was normally on board, please thank the crew. Most of the others came up front at the end and said thank you. So we got to know them a little. But of course, 90% of the time we're doing our work up front. They're doing their work down the back, and work they did when they were on board.
And the young princes?
Well, we had, when Prince William was born, I was lucky enough to fly his very first flight. And when he got to about 2.5, I think it was, we took his parents up to Glasgow, and then he was going on to Aberdeen with Nanny Barnes, his nanny. And he came down the steps and shook hands with the group captain at the foot of the steps. Absolutely lovely, much to the delight of about 60 photographers. It really was. It was lovely. But then later, when he was about 3.5, he came up front one day and we were chatting to him. And I said to him, would you like to put the undercarriage down? So he leant over and we showed him what to do, and he put it down. Of course, then when he grew up a bit and Prince Harry grew up a bit, we couldn't have two of them on the flight deck. It was too dangerous. So we had to stop him doing that.
So some fun times
and
some enjoyable times, but also, I mean, some difficult times. Now, what happened in 1994 with Prince Charles, this sort of supposed crash landing? What happened and how culpable were you?
I took the rap for it, quite rightly, because I was captain of the aircraft. There was no doubt about it.
So what, Charles wants to take the controls?
He took the controls and did the approach, and he said to me at about 500 feet, are we okay? We were a little bit high, but the 146 stopped very well. So I said, yes, land. And we did. We knew we were on the ground because the nose wheel was right under our seat. We're doing that. I took the control column and pushed it forward, as I normally did, but I think I probably did it a bit quickly because we'd landed a little bit down the runway, and it lifted the main wheels off the ground. So consequently, when they came back down, two of the two tyres burst. So yes, it was my fault. We only went off the runway by about 4 feet. I now know there's a peat bog at the end of the Islay runway. If it had been Aberdeen, we'd have probably just taxied off the grass and back to dispersal. But not my finest hour. But isn't hindsight a wonderful
Well,
thing?
yeah. And I guess other incidents, I mean, weather and aborted landings and things like that.
They all worked, but I'm known for the one that didn't work. But of course,
life can be very
but
unfair.
The Prince of Wales rang on the Sunday morning. This happened on a Thursday, and on the Sunday morning I got a phone call to say the Prince of Wales would like to speak to you at 8:30. He came on the phone. His first question was, how are your wife and family taking all the press coverage?
That was nice.
Absolutely lovely. And then he also said to the Board of Inquiry that he wanted me to continue to fly him. I knew he was actually giving up flying, not because of the Islay incident, but because of the work level he had to do while he was on board. He found time, he was coming up later to do the approach, did the takeoffs quite often, although towards the end he started to say, no, I won't do the takeoff, I'll just do the landing. And you know, I realised that the amount of work, because he had to see all government papers and has done for 50 years.
He's got plenty to do now.
Yeah.
And of course, in 1997, the dramatic, shocking news of the death of Diana, and you flew off to Paris with some of her sisters.
That's right. Yes, I was due to fly the Prince and I think it was Prince William back to Lynham because he was going back to school that morning. So I knew that I'd have a crew in. My son came in and told me at about 2 o'clock there'd been the accident. And when I woke up at 6, I realised it had been fatal. And that day just flew by. I think the lovely thing, as far as I was concerned, was that it was a Sunday. So the hierarchy weren't at work. So it was left to my crew and a few people at Northolt. When we took off from Northolt at 10 o'clock in the morning, there were 47 people working. When we came back, there were over 400 press
there. I bet there were. No, I bet there were. And the sad job of bringing the body back.
Yeah. You know, it was the shock of the original incident, I think. When I got back up to Aberdeen, the crew said, what are you going to do? What are you going to say when he comes forward? And I said, I doubt if he will, but he did.
You did.
We spoke apparently for about 4 minutes. I couldn't even tell my own crew. I wouldn't tell you what we said, but I couldn't tell my crew half an hour later. It was just, I think the end of the day, we just went, oh, and that was it. But no, I was amazed he came up. And,
no, I would be too. And it's now a month, 4 or 5 weeks have gone by since the Queen died, and literally outside the studio, that's where they were queuing.
Yes,
all up the embankment and over Lambeth Bridge. Reflections on that?
Well, I think that showed what high esteem Her Majesty was counted in this country. I mean, she was wonderful. I mean, and what I liked about that, yes, it was very, very sad, but she was working 2 days before. And absolutely working to the end. And I think it was in Scotland, which she loved so much. So it was never going to be good, but, you know, to finish like that, and it was over quickly again, which I think nobody would have wanted her to hang around.
No, I agree with that. I think we can now reflect a bit more on it. At the time, it still seemed a hell of a shock to all of us. You know?
Absolutely.
And back to Rutlish, and back to John Major, who has been all over the press this weekend. And my goodness gracious me, the Crown, it appears, have really, as they've come into the modern age, well, according to John Major, taken some astonishing liberties, including a story that Charles wanted to engineer with the Prime Minister the abdication of the Queen 30 years ago. How do you respond to these Crown stories?
Well, everything I've been involved in the press has never been 100% correct. So perhaps I rest my case.
yeah. But it does look as though this last series of The Crown is going to be an American attempt at traducing the royal family.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I really do.
All of which makes me reflect on why Harry's working with Netflix, but I won't ask you that.
I'll sit back on that one.
No, I think you're very, very wise. Well, Graham, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
My pleasure.
Lovely to see you.
Cheers.
Thank you. OK, it's time for Barrage the Farage. You send your questions in. I don't look at them first, and we do our very best. Here goes. Robert asks me, what excuse does Belarus have to get involved with the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Well, look, you know, Belarus and Russia are pretty much joined at the hips. Their leaders are incredibly close, so there's no particular surprise in terms of how closely they're working together. However, if this flow of Russian troops into Belarus is to be another attempt on the Ukrainian capital, then that would be extremely dangerous. And it's a strange thing, you know, a couple of weeks ago, everyone was saying the Russian army's finished. And history teaches us, actually, if they're united, the Russian army is very rarely finished. One viewer says, with more attacks on Ukraine today, when do you think we'll start to see this settle down? The one thing I would say that's incredible is that anyone but tries to say, let's have a conversation about peace, is shouted down as being a Putin supporter. Graham, you know, you were in the Royal Air Force, part of our defence. Why no peace negotiations? Do you understand?
Well, it does seem, I know our present Prime Minister, I think, went to Russia just before the war and tried to do something, but, you know, there seems to be a lack generally, I think, of people wanting to take it on.
Yeah, there isn't much desire for peace. I don't get it. Bob asks me, will Liz Truss last until the weekend? It's irrelevant. The country's being run by the pro-Chinese Communist Party Remainer, high taxer, big stater, Jeremy Hunt. You may just as well have a Labour government, it seems to me. And Nigel asks me, who's in charge of the country, the government or the markets? Look, you know, markets go up, markets go down. Yes, there was a run. Yes, there was a scare. I suspect we'll see it again. I don't think this psychodrama in the Conservative Party is over yet. She'll hang on for a bit. They'll force her out. There won't be a coronation. There'll be a contest between two or more Conservative figures. It'll be bitter. It'll be bloody. What can I say? They're not fit for purpose. They serve no purpose. They're dead politically to me. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're going to go out and take the People's Forum round the country because we want to hear from you about what the future of Conservative values is in this country. We're going to be in Deal this Thursday evening. If you want to come along, watch this package. Is at a crossroads. What do we really think about the highest tax burden since 1950? How does this impact local communities? Where does the national economic debate go from here? I'm going to start off in Deal in Kent this Thursday, the 20th of October. To give us your view on where this debate should go, go to gbnews.uk and join me on the People's Forum. The People's Forum, yes, this Thursday in Deal and Kent in the constituency of Dover and Deal. Enough from me. I'm back tomorrow at 7. I'll hand you over now to Mark Stein.
What was it you call that guy, Nigel? A pro-commie, high-tax Remainer. Great, that's great. So much for following that leadership competition. You're right. So much for following all that leadership competition all summer. We're going to talk about various aspects of this and indeed get back to Nigel's core question at the top of his show. Does this party serve any useful purpose? We're going to break it all down with the great David Starkey, with Toby Young, with John O'Sullivan, all kinds of people coming up for you in the next 60 minutes. It all starts right after the weather.
Good evening, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather updates. Turning a bit misty overnight, so a few fog patches likely, which could be fairly slow to clear tomorrow morning. But for most, tomorrow is going to be a dry and a bright day with some spells of sunshine. There are low pressure systems dominating, but one is moving away, and this one's only making slow progress in. So actually in between, most places becoming dry and clear overnight. Still a few showers this evening over northern parts of Scotland. We'll keep a few going over the Northern Isles, Caithness, Sutherland and Aberdeenshire, but otherwise it's going to be dry for most through the night. And the winds will ease off as well after a fairly blustery day across the north. Light winds. Clear skies means a bit of a chilly one. Temperatures likely to dip down close to freezing in rural spots of Northern Ireland. A chilly start and a foggy start as well. Parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, down across East Wales and the Midlands. Some fog, as I say, could take a while to clear through the morning as well. But once that's gone, it's dry and bright for the vast majority. Still the odd shower over the Northern Isles, Aberdeenshire, and maybe one or two for Devon and Cornwall. But I say most places dry and bright. And temperatures in the south, again, getting into the mid to high teens. Still feeling quite chilly across northern Scotland, although the winds will be a lot lighter compared to today. Light winds and clear skies allowing for another chilly one across parts of Scotland, but a change down to the southwest as cloud starts to thicken and showery rain drifts northwards at first over southwest England into Wales. And then during Wednesday, we'll see some of that wet weather pushing northwards into parts of the Midlands, eventually northern England and Northern Ireland too. Some of the bursts of rain could be on the heavy side. Quite a lot more cloud then across the south on Wednesday compared to Tuesday, and the wind starting to pick up once more. Still quite mild here, but temperatures further north also ticking up a little bit with a bit more sunshine here during Wednesday. Feeling quite pleasant, I suspect, in western Scotland. Low pressure continues to dominate. Bands of wet and windy weather swinging north this week, but